Welcome everybody. Welcome to this afternoon session. I'm Steve Schmidt, and I'm a professor of adult education at East Carolina University, which is in Greenville, North Carolina, and I'll be the host for this session. And I'd like to introduce our speakers today and our topic. We're on from 3:30 to 4:30 p.m. Eastern Time, and the topic is topic-based learning saves resources and improves learning. And our presenters today are Bruce Cronquist, who's the Education Services Program and Project Manager Consultant at Dell Technologies, and Todd Stone, who's a Senior Advisor and Project and Program Manager at Dell Technologies as well. So Todd and Bruce, I'll turn it over to you. And those of you who are here, if you'd like to type your questions in the chat function, there's a Q&A function as well. You can type them in, or you can save them till the end, the last probably 10 minutes or so we will have for questions. So whatever works best for you. And Bruce and Todd, I'll turn it over to you.
Awesome. Thank you so much for the introduction.
Yeah, thanks, Steve.
So yeah, we have a poll I've posted in a chat. You also see it up on the screen. If you go and take that, we'll be looking at the results in a couple of slides. A whole two of us, but hey, it's quality over quantity, right? So thanks for showing up. Actually, Todd, you want to go for this one?
This one's an easy one. So I'm Todd Stone, and been at Dell now for about 6 years. Before Dell was with Microsoft for a little while. Within that time, I've been working in colleges as an instructor. So I've been teaching online since 2001 is when I started teaching technology courses in colleges. So I've also been an LMS administrator, Blackboard administrator, Moodle administrator, and done a lot of courseware development stuff with colleges before getting into the technology sector. So that's me. Bruce?
Yeah, so Bruce Cronquist, also Dell, just a little bit shorter than Todd. In fact, I think you interviewed me, if I remember correctly. But we're birds of a feather because I also worked at Microsoft beforehand and also teach classes at night in data science and software testing. So we're familiar, we kind of work in the corporate industry, but also are very familiar with the education industry, which is kind of fun for this conference. You're probably familiar with Dell as a company. It's a small worldwide company, about, I think, 200,000 employees or 180,000 employees, something like that. If you look at the number of people in education services, there's about 700 of us. And it may sound large, but that works out to be about 220 employees for each of us that we're responsible for if you just do straight division. We're actually set up a small agile team. So we're set up with, one or two program managers, one or two people from content development, one or two people who are learning consultants. So we actually work as very small, agile, like mini companies. Main thing to understand about Dell is we have what's called the Dell Culture Code, and it's very important to us as employees that we're not only rated towards it, but also we use it to help direct what our day-to-day work is. And one of those is self-improvement. So we're always trying to improve not only ourselves and our coworkers, but also industry overall. And that's why we love presenting at conferences like this, is to help share what our experiences are. All right. What do you need? Go for it.
Okay, so we're going to start out with an activity. Before we do that, I'm just going to go over a little bit as far as the presentation, what we're going to be going over. We're going to be talking about topic-based learning. So topic-based learning is a development process that we started doing at Dell probably about, what did you say, 3 years ago, Bruce? Yeah. And so the idea is taking our larger traditional courses they were primarily classroom-based, 5-day trainings, long instructor-led trainings. And with this process, with topic-based learning, it broke these courses down into smaller micro-learning courses. It also has a lot of benefits as far as reuse and being able to reuse content and create self-contained learning objects that you can then build with other ones. So that gives you an idea as far as what the presentation is going to be about. For right now, what we're going to do is we're going to start out talking about what you need to know to drive a car. So we're going to be taking suggestions from the audience. So go ahead and put it in your chat, like what are some things you need to know how to drive a car? So here we've got a Yugo. So we've got a Yugo and we've got a Formula One. So two very, very different types of cars. So one of the things we want to emphasize here is the importance of with topic-based learning is knowing your audience. So really knowing what your audience needs to do their job. So in this case, we've got two different types of cars. So a Formula One driver, they're probably going to need to know some different things than a Yugo driver is going to know to drive their car. They're probably going to handle and perform very differently. Is it time for Yugo jokes, Bruce?
Oh, definitely. Well, we'll start out as an example. What's one thing you might need to know about driving a car? You need to know how to change a tire, right?
Yep. Changing tire. What else? Also, how to start a car, right? The process of starting a car. So what we're looking for is we want to get some ideas from you guys. And the idea is that we're going to then be taking these and we're going to show you how we would develop a training for driving a car, or give you an overview of how we'd use topic-based learning to develop that training. So what are some other things? We've got starting a car, we've got braking. And let's see, is there anything coming in from anything else from the audience coming in? Let's see.
Oh,
checking mirrors. Okay,
good
one. Changing oil, change oil. Yep. Steer. Nice.
Good. Keep them coming.
All right. Keep them coming.
Ignore any typos. I'll get them fixed, but you can never type while people are watching. That's wrong steering.
So while we're waiting, some more Yugo jokes. How do you make a Yugo go faster? A tow truck. Some drums. All right, yeah, we've got a few Yugo jokes to kill the time. Let's see. How do you double the value of a Yugo? Fill the tank. All right, what else do we have coming in? We've got parking.
Yep.
One laugh there. All right, we got parking. We've got windshield wipers. We've got turning. We've got traffic laws. Gas. Okay, cool. So we've got a few here.
Yep, that's a good start.
Yeah.
Oh, we got one more joke though. How do you change a tire on a Yugo? You get a new Yugo. Or for the F1, you just have somebody else change your tire. So different audiences have different tasks.
Probably cheaper buying a new tire than a new Yugo. Yeah. All right. So we've got an idea here. So let's move on to the next slide. And all right. So what is topic-based learning? All right, so topic-based learning it's designing training that's based on what the learner needs to do, especially for like technical training. What we do a lot of is they're going to be asked to do something. They're going to change a server. They're going to replace a hard drive. They're going to set up a network. So there's specific tasks that they're going to need to do to know to do their job. And so what topic-based learning is doing is we're identifying what those tasks are, and we're training to those tasks. We're not giving a lot of the contextual, the background information that trainings typically have. A lot of that nice to know information, a lot of that I call fluff stuff. That stuff is all stuff that we can link out to. So we don't need to have the learner going through all of that content. You may be familiar with like long instructor-led courses, so 5-day instructor-led courses. A lot of times what we would find is people were coming to get information that were maybe on days 4 and 5 of the training. They didn't need to be in those other days, so it was a waste of their time. So with topic-based learning, it really let us reduce the amount of time of those trainings and make it more learner specific and focused on what the learner needs to know and what they need to do. It also helped us create smaller courses. We were able to take these larger multi-day courses, and once we started cutting out a lot of this fluff and we put them on a diet, we started seeing that we could really get them down to the essence of what the learner really needed. So we weren't wasting the learner's time with a lot of this extra information. We still gave them links out to information so they could get that information if they needed it, but they didn't have to sit there and go through it in the training. So it's helped us create smaller courses. It's also allowed us to put the learning experience closer to the time of need. So one of the things with adult learning theory is that we know that learning is more, it sticks and it's more relevant if we can put that closer to the time when that learning's needed. There's the idea of the Ebbinghaus curve, or the Ebbinghaus theory, where it's within, I think it was about 20 minutes, about 50% of the content is lost if that content isn't reinforced some way. So with topic-based learning, it lets us break these trainings into smaller pieces that we can then put closer to the time of need for the training. All right, next slide. Okay, so why it's important. So it's learner focus. So the learning is always going to be better if it's focused around the learner and what they need to learn to do their job. So it's learner focused. Another excuse me, thing is it's cut through a lot of the clutter, like I said, that we had in our courses. We had these big courses that had a lot of nice to know information, but this let us cut that out and let us create these smaller, really succinct micro learning style courses. That resulted in faster development time. We also found out that as we started creating courses this way, it was faster development time, but we could also reuse the content. Because what we do is when we're creating topic-based learning, and Bruce is going to talk a little bit about this in just a bit, is we take a course and we break it down into its smaller components. And each one of those smaller components is its own self-contained learning object, so that you can then take that learning object and you can apply it to other learning objects or combine it with other learning objects, almost like Legos, like stacking Legos together. You can take the individual bricks and you can start building these trainings. They can be a large training if you need a large training, or it can be a very small, just a micro learning training. So it allowed us to reuse content, which saves time and saves money in the long run. Okay, and why we did it. So a lot of this stemmed from the merger between EMC and Dell, because we had two different training departments that were now coming together, and we were coming together into a new LCMS. So Dell is using Xylene. And so we had this content, and we had repetitive content in a lot of situations. So we had to really go through our content. And so at this point, it was a good point for us to assess our development process and determine, are we going to continue developing the way that we were doing it over here at EMC, or are we going to do it the way it was over at Dell? What we found out is both sides sort of did certain things better than the other. So when we came together, it gave us a chance to sort of merge our content and to look at what worked well and to bring the best of both worlds together into one system. So that's why we started with topic-based learning. But we also, during that time, we started interviewing our learners, our audience, and we found out that they don't really want these large trainings. A lot of salespeople will say that, all right, we need to have these big, long trainings, these instructor-led trainings that we can sell. But when we started talking to learners, they're like, well, we don't have time to send our learners for a week, 4 days even, to these trainings and pay for them to fly somewhere, put them up, pay for all that. What we need is we need smaller trainings that they can fit within their workday. They can fit within the flow of their work. So they may have 15 minutes to go take a little training and to learn about something in between doing a support call. So with topic-based learning, it really allowed us to weave the training into a person's just regular workday. And we got that information through just interviews. We talked to our audience. We found out what they needed, what their needs were, and what they preferred. We also were moving towards an agile development method. So within Dell, we had been doing, sorry.
User error, go for it.
Like, am I going too slow? Time to go for it.
Yeah.
So yeah, we were moving towards an agile development process. So we had been like a waterfall development process as far as project management, and we're moving towards agile. And so we were applying that to the way we develop training also. So the big changes were we, instead of having 4-month, 5-month development processes, we now had 2-week sprints. And so we had to look at how we would break our work into 2-week little work sprints. So it helped us really look at our training and break it down and figure out how we could make it smaller. It also allowed us to drip out content. So the nice part about this, and a really big difference, is that we could now drip training out. So instead of waiting that 4 or 5 months for training to be developed and then delivered, we could now, within 2 weeks, even sometimes a month, we could drip out bits of training. And so what we would do is we would negotiate with our stakeholders. We say, well, we can't do everything in these 2-week sprint cycles, but we can do a little bit. So what do you need right now? What's the most important thing your audience needs to learn? We could drip that out over, well, 2-week, maybe month sprints, two sprints at a time, so a month, instead of having to wait that 4 or 5 months. So we were able to provide more, not instant value, but value sooner than if they were doing a traditional development process. All right. All right, now I'm done with that one.
Yeah. Well, actually, let's take a look at the survey results. Forgot to go ahead and do that an earlier one. Let's see if we have some responses here. All right, so great. So it looks like we have 3 people who've answered the questions. Let me get the font size a little bigger so you go and read. So basically, how big is the group that you're working with? So we have a third of the people are saying there's a lot of us, or 1 person, and 2 people are saying there's just a few of us. So we like to gather this information because it helps us. We'll kind of adapt the rest of the presentation. So how many learners do you serve? 26 to 100 is 1/3, and basically a lot of them is 2/3. Awesome. How do you develop training today? I like it. Agile. It's nice to actually see it here. And
Yeah.
then good old Addy. That always a safe bet.
Mhm.
And then what do you want to go and get out of this presentation? Ideas, examples. Oh, and networking. Okay. Sounds good. Yeah, we'll be getting to examples momentarily. Because we got how to drive a car. We'll be playing with those ideas. Perfect. So give a little bit of background on how we go about doing it. Dell is paperwork driven almost to a fault, but there is a method to our madness. By doing a lot of work up front, we cut down the work that we have to go and do later. So whenever a stakeholder or a group approaches us, the first thing we do is we fill out a BNA, or business needs analysis. And it's very data driven at that point. We find out based upon their need, is there any existing training? What are the consumption expectations? Is it going to be 5 people or 5,000 taking the training? And based upon that data, if we are going to go and accept it and start creating the training, then we go to the next step called the LNA, or learner needs analysis. That's where we actually sit down, talk with the stakeholder, and hopefully talk with the learners, or go through the learner profiles, and to find out what are their tasks, what are they doing day to day, where are the gaps. So this is where we become very consultative at this point. Once we have that information documented, then we get down to the blueprint, the actual content we're going to go ahead and create. But we don't create it at this point. We create basically a summary of, here are the modules we're going to be talking about. And again, we've broken it down based upon the tasks the learner's trying to do, and then the training we're going to provide for that. And the training may be an e-learning or a short video, but it could also be, hey, we already have existing training on that. Here's a link to it. Or it's in the user's guide. Just let's point the learner to the user's guide. Once all that's done, then we actually start creating the training or the learning solution for the stakeholder. The takeaway from this is we're very data driven in terms of making decisions of when we're creating training and how we're going to create or deliver the training. But since we spend all this time up front, we're generally more successful when we create those trainings, and it's much, much easier to measure the success or the KPIs of the training that we've created. So the actual meat and potatoes is topic-based learning, or we also sometimes will call it task-based learning. So we start out at the very top in the blue, what's called a skill, and it's what you're trying to do. And the example we started with today is, how do you go about driving a car? So that's the skill that we're trying to develop in the learner. Then we break it down into the orange here, which is what's called the topics. And these are the items that be consumed individually, or as Todd had put earlier, Lego bricks that we can start stacking upon each other. And they can contain more than one task. So example would be, a topic might be driving the car to the store to buy something. So that's going to include starting the car, driving, accelerating, decelerating, parking. It's multiple individual tasks. Another topic, if we're thinking about inside of Dell, for example, we're talking with the product support agents who are working on the phone. They need to know how to, answer a phone, find a solution for the customer, log the case. All these things are one topic, handling a customer call, but the tasks will actually break down into the other bricks. So the third area we break it down to is the actual task. And that is, the important thing to know about a task is it's a single item, and it's something that's measurable. Skill, driving a car, you can't really measure that saying it was successful. Well, maybe if you brought the car back without any new dents, that might have been successful. Same thing with the topic. You're able to go drive the car to the store. Again, you can't really measure that. But for the tasks, you can measure it, such as, were you able to brake, carefully brake to a stop in front of the stop line in the street. That's something you could measure. They succeeded in it or not. Or the task of the call center agent was able to correctly use the soft phone to answer the phone call and greet the customer correctly. Those are things you can actually measure. So those are at the task level. So I guess I'll go ahead and stop here for the moment. Are there any questions on the difference between a skill, a topic, and a task? I was kind of throwing it aside. If these kind of look familiar with some other trainings that you might have taken or seen online, we actually adapted this from what's called the 5 moments of need from Applied Synergies. It's a training that we took as education services that were called product owners or learning consultants back then. And they had their moments, and we saw that we actually ended up expanding upon this idea turned into topic-based learning. So if we want to go ahead and take a look at topic-based learning in action, we go ahead and switch over to OneNote. So here's all the ideas that we had earlier that you've given us about tasks to go ahead and drive a car. So I'm going to go ahead and paste these into. All right, I can't even move my own controls here. Hang on a second. Make this a little bit bigger so it's easier to read. So we know the skill we're trying to do is drive a car. So we've already determined that. So now we're wondering which of these are topics and which of these are tasks. So the first one is called changing a tire. Is that something that we can go ahead and measure? And feel free to put, a yes in the chat or a no. All right. I guess we have a silent audience. We should got to go through these, Todd.
So as far, sorry,
yep. Go for it. Oh, here you go.
So that one would be, all right. Sorry, I'm looking. Let me get my glasses on.
Oh, there you go. So we got in the chat a maybe and also a yes, but it can be broken up into several tasks.
Yeah, changing a tire can be broken down into multiple tasks, right? So
yep.
Getting
so
the tire out of the
topic. Yep.
Trunk. Just taking the tire off. So yeah, a bunch of different things can
get tire off. Jack the car up. They're not necessarily in order. Jack car up. Loosen the bolts. Yep.
And Shelly's got yes, but it's broken into separate tasks. Yep.
Yep. So perfect. So yeah, the skill of driving a car, the topic of changing a tire, we can break it up into tasks. Getting the tire off, we can measure that. Jacking the car up, something measurable. Loosening the bolts, that's something we can go ahead and measure. Perfect. How about acceleration? Start seeing a pattern. Probably a topic, I'm going to guess, just because you can't really measure acceleration. But what are some of the tasks that would come with measuring acceleration?
So we'd have applying the gas, right?
Okay, yeah. We'll put smoothly because then it's measurable. Applying gas itself really isn't measurable, but
we've got pushing your foot on the gas. Yep.
Okay, good. What are some other ideas about acceleration?
Probably monitor speed or.
Okay, so monitor speed. Okay, perfect.
So now, are you guys sort of seeing how this is working? So we have a skill that can be composed of a bunch of different topics, and a topic can have a bunch of different tasks. So they sort of nest within each other, and they become a self-contained training. So the training on driving a car right here would then have the topics of how to change a tire, how to accelerate, and then you'd have these items underneath it. So is this making sense? Or are you guys seeing how this could work? Okay.
All right. We got one yes. That's good.
As long as we don't see no's.
Yeah. So what we've also done here is let me actually make these black here. So that what we ended up doing is after we developed this list, we thought there's actually something more that we needed to do in order to help us decide which training goes to which type of people and how much it's reusable. We needed to consider the audience, the criticality, and also additional resources. So in this case, for an audience, we're driving the car. We have our Yugo drivers and our F1 Formula drivers. But also let's break it down into, let's say, a new car driver. So a teen who's just learning to drive for the first time, and a seasoned driver. And let's say, Todd, you and I have gone over to Europe, and we need to take a driver's ed test because we're going to be living in England now. So changing a tire, would this be something that is for new drivers only, or existing drivers, or both?
For both.
Yeah, probably for, yeah. So it could be for both, though we probably already have the experience.
Yeah.
Right. So in essence, it's probably going to be just the new drivers are the ones that need to take this as a course or for content. Acceleration, that one probably would be new drivers also. But what I liked earlier was the rules of the road that somebody had mentioned. So for rules of the road, one of the simple things would be, which side of the street do we drive on? Or driving on the correct side of the street would be a task. And in this case, it would be for both new and existing drivers. So we now know that if we're creating the learning path and we're assembling all of these task-based components together, we know that for new drivers, they're going to get all of these tasks training. But for existing drivers, Todd and myself move into Europe, we would only need to take the rules of the road section. But now when you actually get down to it, we have to decide what's called the criticality. And let's go back here. So criticality, we assign the numbers 1 to 4 to it. Basically, criticality of 1, there's a small decrease in performance, but nothing bad really happens. Criticality of 2, there's a limited but noticeable impairment to the success of accomplishing that task. 3, there could be a sizable cost, maybe of repair or of the reputation of the company, or it could be some type of long-lasting consequences. 4 is that there's a major problem for the client, the organization, something to that effect. So if we're looking at the levels 1 through 4, if someone doesn't correctly change the tire, what do you think it would be? 1, 2, 3, or 4? Go and type it into chat. So if someone
I'll
were
just say this. Oh, sorry. Go for it, Bruce. I was just gonna say this is one of the pieces when we started doing the topic-based development. This was really an eye-opener because when you go to your audience, if you're an instructional designer, and you go to them and you say, "All right, when do you need this, and what do they need to know?" They're going to say, "Well, we need it yesterday," right? And they're going to say they need to know everything. So everything, yeah, it's all got to be in there. And so then you get those courses that have all that fluff and just wasted time. So by doing this criticality, it gave us a way to talk to our stakeholders and say, well, really, is that really necessary? Does that have to be in there? What's going to happen if we don't include training on this piece? Is the business going to fail, or is it just going to be that they have to go look for a resource somewhere else? They have to go click on a link. So by bringing that criticality piece up in your discussions with your stakeholders when you're developing this training, it really gets them thinking as far as what's necessary and what's just nice to know content.
Yep, so I was going to go throw in here, set the radio station. So someone who can't necessarily set the radio station, that's probably, again, just new drivers. If we're looking back here, if they can't set the radio station, probably a 1, small decrease in performance, but it's not really that big of a deal. So we'd go back to the stakeholder. Actually, let's go down here. So how about acceleration? We'll get one more number in here. If somebody isn't able to accelerate the car smoothly, let's say to merge onto a freeway or accelerate smoothly out of a parking lot, do we think it'd be 1, 2, 3, or 4? It's probably not 1 or 4. So I'm guessing it's probably someplace in the middle.
3. Say 3.
Yeah, 3, because it could become a dangerous situation if they were to say slide out, for example. Yeah. And rules of the road, we'll go and put down, this could be a major one. So we'll just put a 4. But now that we define these criticalities, as Todd mentioned, we go back to the stakeholder and saying, great, now that we've worked on this criticality ratings, we're going to go and start on number 4 first, because this is the first training, the one that's going to have the most impact. Sorry, if you're not breaking correctly, impact is a poor choice of words. But again, it'd be a safety issue. So let's go and work on this training first, and then we'll work on the 3 next, the 2 next. And then by the time we actually get down to 1, it may be the stakeholder goes, we really don't need that training anymore. So let's go ahead and do, and Therefore, we've actually held the work off long enough to where it's actually fallen off. We don't need to worry about doing it anymore. It's not that important. Last column we have is the resource. Up to this point, we've talked about we're actually going to provide training on how to take the tire off, how to jack the car up. But frankly, do we need to create training for that? Is there some existing training that we can go ahead and curate? Heck, what do you normally do when you need to do something? You pull out your phone and what? Go to YouTube? So let's go ahead and instead of actually creating training, let's just provide the user a link to YouTube training on how to do it. Yep. Or the user manual.
This also just goes to reinforce that idea as far as like sending them out. Like we don't need to include everything in the training, right? We can send them out to stuff. An example is like I had to fix my washer. The washer broken, and so I'm not going to go through and read my whole manual on the washer, right? I'm going to go to a YouTube and I'm going to find a video that shows me how to fix that one thing, and that's what I did. And it was the best video I'd ever seen. It saved me time and money. But that's where it's you don't have to know everything. You just need to know what you need to do at that point.
Yeah. So again, also you can start working on combining modalities or solutions together. So let's say there's the driver's education manual. And we can go ahead and do, say, a multimodal training here to where before we actually start teaching the rules of the road or having the person practice in the car, we give them the driver's education manual, have them read it, have them take a short pre-assessment test to make sure they've read it. And now when they come into the actual class, the ILT, for example, or VILT, then we know that everyone has the same base level of knowledge. And then we only need to teach the important things that need to be taught in person or virtually, taking up the person's valuable in-person time. So I think I know just going to want to look at the last comment somebody left here. Changing the tires, getting the training at the point of need. Yep, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, because if I took the training on, how to change the tire and I don't use it for 3 years, I'm probably not going to remember how to go about doing that.
Yeah.
Acceleration rules of the road, get the training up before you start driving. Perfect. So any questions on kind of how we went about applying this, applying topic or task-based learning? And we'll have a PDF of the content here that Todd and I gave, and we'll have that up on the platform, the Whova platform. If there's no other questions, we'll go on to the next one.
Right. So yeah, just to wrap everything up, sort of the lessons we learned from this project. So we really learned it's important to know your audience, right? We need to know if we've got that Formula One driver, or if we got that, excuse me, we've got that Yugo driver. It's going to be different for each of those audiences. So really getting to know your audience, doing a needs assessment, a learner needs analysis in the beginning is a definite bonus. Really knowing your learner and what their needs are. So to do a pilot, if you're thinking about doing topic-based learning and you're not doing it at this point, start small. Don't just jump in and go full bore. Start with a small pilot. Always better do a little pilot, and if something goes wrong, it doesn't go sideways on a big scale. It's just on a small scale, and you can fix stuff. So always better to go small and learn from your lessons. Lessons learned also at TBL and Agile. So with this, we were able to move to a more agile development process. With TBL, we were able to drip content out over a period of time instead of having to wait 3 or 4 months to be able to deliver the final product. We were able to drip it out. We were also able to drip it out and figure out what was the most important for the learners and what they needed. So instead of, again, waiting for the final product, they were able to get the most important stuff they needed right away. We also learned that we needed to upskill the workforce, and by doing TBL, it gave us a chance to break out of developing in silos. A lot of our teams were developing in their own little silos, and they were doing their own thing, but we weren't able to share the experience and the best practices amongst our other development teams. So by doing topic-based learning, it allowed us to break out of those development silos and to create these smaller trainings and get on the same page. And one of the biggest things that we got out of this is the ability to reuse content, and the money that saves and the time that saves our developers. So instead of starting from scratch each time, we're able to see what we've already developed. We're able to search on that, find content that we can then pull into the new training, and we can put those Lego blocks in the way that we want and develop the training that we want, either a big training or it can be a small little micro learning training. It can also be multimodal. So like what Bruce was saying, how you have the handout, we can have that document, they can be reading through that. They could then take a portion of that online, and then we may even have like an online simulation that they'd be able to do and get hands-on experience with that.
It should be interesting to note that of all these things, pretty much all of it's been successful with the exception of the last one, the content reuse. Even though we have our system, we happen to use Xyleme to go ahead and store the content. It's actually very hard to get to catalog all the content that we have and actually make true reuse of it. Example would be if you have a very large server with multiple racks and multiple disk drives in those racks, it's very different how to power down certain parts of the disk array, how to open the drawers to pull the drawer out that has all the hard disks in it. But once you actually get down to, here's the hard disk, I pull these 2 pins, pull out the hard disk, put the new one in, put the 2 pins back in, that one step is always the same, no matter which of the systems you're working with. But to actually get down to people being able to find that piece of content in the thousands and thousands of pieces of content we already have, and come up with a naming system where people can find it and actually reuse it, that's where you've had the most problems. That's where the pilot actually comes in important, saying, once you start creating these little pieces, making sure that people actually do reuse them.
Yeah, taxonomy became a big.
That's the term. Thank you.
Yeah, how to label your content so that it can then be found, the keywords that you use and how you set those up. So that is something that, and as Bruce was saying, we found that out in a pilot. So instead of finding out when we launched it across the world on a big scale, we were able to launch it in a small group and find out what the problems were and fix that before we did launch at a bigger scale.
Yep. And we figured all this out when it was 20 degrees below in Minnesota at a team meeting. That was a fun one.
Yeah.
All right, so that's pretty much the end, the presentation that we had. I'm not sure if there are any questions.
Yeah,
there's also our contact information up here. If you want to go and reach out to us afterwards or through the Whova platform during the presentation.
Yeah, always feel free to drop. Sorry, I was going to say, yeah, feel free to drop us a line. You got our emails here, so if you guys have questions afterwards that come to mind, please feel free to ping us and let us know.
Okay, great. Thank you, Bruce and Todd. If you have questions, again, put them in the Q&A section or put them in the chat section. And while we're waiting for questions to come in, I do have a topic I wonder if you could talk about a little bit, Todd and Bruce, and that is how you do assessments at the task, topic, and skill levels, and what they look like and when you do them. Because I know you can be successful at one, but not. You could do the task right, but maybe not do the topic right. You could do the topic right, and maybe you won't master the entire skill. So talk a little bit about the assessment piece of this equation, please.
Yeah, it's actually a pretty complex Excel spreadsheet that we've put together and that we're always, kind of working our way through, but we pretty much are walking through the, day in the life of whatever the skill is that the person's trying to do and documenting each of those steps and then making sure that we have them documented correctly. And that's probably what ends up taking the most time. It was interesting because as we were training ourselves, moving from the, hey, let's go ahead and do a classic e-learning, for example, and saying, here are the module names, here's what we'll cover in each module, to more of this, here's this Excel chart or Excel spreadsheet that has each of the tasks, how they're going to roll into the modules, which ones get reused. We not only had to train ourselves, we also had to retrain the stakeholders saying, yeah, you used to get this whole listing of here's what it's going to look like with screenshots, but no, we've actually taken a step back and here's the new way of how we're presenting the information to you to review. I'm not sure if that actually...
As far as like assessment also and being able to know if someone has successfully completed a skill or attain that skill, we have activities within for each skill, there's an activity, an experiential learning activity that goes along that demonstrates or gives them the opportunity to try and do that activity hands-on, and then be able to demonstrate that as well, that they've been able to accomplish that. But then we do have knowledge checks as well, just your regular questions that we ask in like an online course. But we're trying to move more towards, or not trying, we are moving more towards experiential learning and trying to have hands-on skills in these courses. Even online stuff, we're looking at stuff that we can do with AI, with augmented reality, AR, and stuff like that. But we're really trying to move towards more experiential learning.
And do you monitor, or does the you know, who like if with a learner, for example, they may think that they are successful in doing that, but maybe they're not. I mean, who kind of keeps track of that sort of thing, or is it all like if the learner, is it all based on learner perceptions and things like that?
A lot of it is based on the score that they get. There's still a test that they're taking at the end of the training. So once this training has been compiled, we've taken these skills and we've compiled them into a training. They then still have to go through and take a test saying that they've passed this, and they're also doing the skills or the activities, the hands-on activities, and showing that they're able to accomplish those. So that's how we're seeing if they're able to do it. Beyond that, then it would come to, I guess, their managers or on the floor. If they're unable to do that job, then we're finding out about it. But that's how we're checking them before the end of the training. Does that answer your question?
Yep. Great.
We're still kind of at Kirkpatrick levels 1 and 2. You know, we also have the, satisfaction numbers at the end, and we have to maintain a, believe it or not, 95% satisfaction rating. And if any of our courses drop below that, we have to go ahead and look at the comments from the learners and make any adjustments in order to get it back up to 95% or better for the satisfaction ratings.
Okay.
Yeah, at points we'll have, I really work with the engineering department on onboarding, for example. We'll set up KPIs such as, they should be able to, check in code 50% faster, or, when half the time that they presently do. So we will measure KPIs like that, but those are usually fairly program specific.
Good. Great. Thank you. All right. Any other questions from anybody here? Okay. Well, seeing none, again, I'd like to thank Bruce and thank Todd for the presentation. I thought it was really interesting, and I learned a lot, and I thank all of you for attending. And we will pick up at the top of the hour, I'm sorry, at the bottom of the hour with our next session.
Sounds great. And if you want to hear a little bit more about TBL, Todd and I are doing a presentation tomorrow where we've actually worked with Bennett College, where the president met us at a conference similar to this and was interested in topic-based learning. That was one of the outcomes of the engagement that we did with them.
Good. Great. Thank you so for more information, check that one out. All right. Thanks, Bruce and Todd.
All right.
Thank you
Thanks,
much.
everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Have a good rest of the conference.
Thanks.
Take care.